But it's the law. Whose law?
Advertising, marketing, what are all those things doing to us? Advertising is not in any way about selling products. It's about controlling how you see yourself. Companies don't just want you to buy their stuff. They want to install a new belief system for you. And it's a new belief system where their product is the solution to a problem that you didn't even know that you had. And the terrifying part about this is it works. Number one goal of advertising is to make you compare yourself to other people. Number two goal of advertising is to make you feel like you are not enough yet. I think the more that we get to a place where we're pulling this stuff out into the light and it's not something unconscious, it's something conscious, then we have control over it. So awareness garners a lot more control than thinking that you're immune to it.
It's April 2025. Now this video is inspired by several different sources and they all tie in together, and it does continue on with the topic of, for example, Psyops, which has been the focus of this particular series. Now originally when I began the series I was going to do one video, then two, and here we are many videos later about Psyops. And I'm going to touch up on some examples of Psyops, and it's going to come full circle to the beginning here. Now, one of the inspirations for this video, I was having a back and forth with someone when it comes to protests, and I had to deal with this so-called convoy and everything else. And at one point, I had stated to this person that their perceived right to protest can be revoked. And then when people do not comply, for example, once it's been revoked to disperse, say with the police, they start arresting people. And they came back as usual because people cannot support their position. They just simply regurgitate nonsense that they hear other people saying, but no one can ever go past this regurgitation mode, which is a sign of a psyop. But anyway, and there was a few other people that kind of related to that conversation, and I'm thinking to myself, like, what's wrong with people? Like, why are they so opposed with what I said and attacking me for it? Because that's all they have, is attacking me, not trying to make an argument on their part, but whatever. And then it dawned on me that people do not understand that everything in society is deemed a privilege. And repeat that. Everything in society is deemed a privilege. Now, I know there's going to be free men of the land, or free man on the land types, and freedom fighter types, and even truther types are going to be going, oh no, blah. They're going to be, you know, something to say because they bought into a whole bunch of nonsense. And I've talked about this and dedicated videos to this, and even the primary individual who was behind all this, Jordan Maxwell, and his nonsense. But let's put this in perspective here. So driving is deemed to be a privilege. Again, this is going to be triggering for free men on the land types and all these others, because they have the right to travel and all this other nonsense. But here's the thing. Say you have someone who shouldn't be driving. They are literally, they don't know how to drive. They can't grasp driving. They're a danger to others. They cause accidents, maybe even take someone from life in an accident, whatever. Or they're repeat offenders with not following the rules of the road. If it's an absolute right, you can't take away their right to drive. They'll continue being a threat to society. And here's an example of why something like driving is a privilege. Because being a privilege, that can be taken away. Now, I'm not going to address here, I've addressed this in other videos, how insurance companies are a scam, and how is it that private corporations are backed by a law that you have to have them. Insurance. I understand that, without getting into too much detail, why that became, because the courts at one point in history were being inundated with cases of somebody caused damage or injury to someone else in a car accident, and this happens all the time. And so to take the pressure off of the courts, because they couldn't even keep up and there was cases being thrown out, it was a mess. They said, okay, insurance companies, you'll deal with that. And there are far fewer court cases when it comes to insurance companies. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but anyway, that's basically the whole idea with that. But I just wanted to focus on everything in society being a privilege. When somebody wants to, for example, protest legally, and they want to occupy a specific land or something to do this protest, whatever, they ask for permission, or they proceed without a formal permission, but it falls under some umbrella. I'm trying to simplify this here. It's a privilege, and that privilege can be revoked. And when people resist, saying, well, it's my right, you gotta really wonder when people say it's their right. It's my right. It's in the Constitution or Charter of Rights and Freedoms, whatever they want to rely on. Well, the people who wrote that, gave it to you, they're the ones that can take it away from you as well. Then you have people defaulting, well, my God-given right. Well, one, relying on some holy books of any religion or belief system, doesn't matter. Well, this is what God allegedly said. No, it's written by men at some point, somewhere along the way, for a different control purpose, but that's a different tangent. There's no right just because you're born. And I've said this in videos, I don't know, like a decade ago. Everyone has the right to life, but not everyone has the right to survive. And that's going to trigger some really sensitive people. That's reality. Life is about survival without compromising self, etc. Going back to privilege, everything's a privileged. Owning land, or did I say owning? Well, use air quotes with that, owning land. And I've mentioned in a fairly recent video where if you look on the title of any piece of land, whether it be there's a house on it or vacant land, whatever, it says you're a tenant of that land. You don't really own it, and that's why the government can come in and they have to offer you fair value, you know, and maybe spice it up a little bit, but they're not really obligated to not take it, is my point. If they needed it for something, like for some infrastructure project or something. Now, I mean, there's people who've gotten around it or tried to, or at least appears it has, and everything else. I'm not going that far in. I just want to hit the topic of everything is a privilege, and protests are a privilege. And protesting is not an act of someone, for example, who is free. People who are truly free, they act free. I've talked about this in videos as well, not too long ago. So everything in society is a privilege, like it or not. And now I'm starting to see Freeman on the Land 2.0 start to surface. And this kind of came about, there was another, if I'm not mistaken, another freedom fighter, hero, fake hero. But I'm going to stop here for a second. I'm going to end calling him a fake hero because if I'm not mistaken with what I've been reading, he did recently pass away. Now, with that said, so reading through some of those comments and stuff like that, and there's another individual who is stepping up saying, well, we can make change in Canada and political change, and we need a government run by our political party that has been vetted and all this other nonsense. The guy has no idea what he's talking about, which I'm going to get into later on in this video. And from that, there were people talking about land title deeds and deeds versus titles and all this other stuff. I'm not going to get into the definitions of all that, but they were saying, or trying to highlight, I guess, where from their perception, their perspective, how it's all been twisted up in people's rights and all this other, we're going back to rights again, privileges. And listening to some of this stuff, and there's actually a video, The Myth is Canada, the Illusion, or something like that. And somebody had drawn my attention to that, sent me a video or something, and I kind of skipped through it. But as soon as I started watching it, I'm like, oh, this is like Freeman on the Land 2.0 talk. And they're talking about how Canada was formed and it was divided, how it grew in land and everything else. None of that really matters. Now, to these people, it does, because they're saying, look, there was some sort of, from their perspective, corruption, but is it really? It goes back to the nonsense of Jordan Maxwell and talking about maritime law and admiralty law and all this other stuff, and how he just kind of twisted it all up because he was feeding the Kool-Aid to the group of resistors who didn't want to or don't agree with, or perhaps he just frustrated with the system that's current. And this is just another evolutionary process of that work. And people are calling this individual who made this video or whatever produced it heroes and true patriots and everything else, and it's just mind-numbing. And I don't feel like going through reiterating stuff that I've already covered and then trying to add this 2.0 to it, because I've already covered it all over the years, over the past decade, and even recently, fairly recently. So we see this evolution of people trying to make change and resist and whatever. But what's really going on behind all this stuff? Well, let's get into some more psyops here. So I've talked about psyops, say political, religious, as well as individuals and groups conducting these psyops, artificial intelligence conducting psyops, even went way out there talking about, as a descriptive, supernatural things conducting psyops, people just being manipulated left, right, and center. But now let's take a look at corporate psyops. For example, branding. Everyone knows the term branding. A company will have their product, their name, their logo, and from childhood throughout someone's life, they brand people with their product, so you automatically default to use their product, to buy their product. And I've hinted in one of my videos about people who support, for example, online advertisements. or now they're called sponsors, but whatever. People may watch a content creator and say, I'm going to watch all the commercials because they deserve the money, the few pennies that they get for the commercials, whatever. But they're voluntarily putting themselves through a psyop, through whatever branding and whatever the commercial is all about. That's just crazy. There was a time where people went from watching television to the internet to watch stuff, to get away from that, commercials, and now it's gone beyond ridiculous online. You can't look at a page without being bombarded with nonsensical commercials and everything else. I want us to stop here for a second. Before these online platforms with videos had commercials to the point where they're just ridiculous now, people were producing great quality content without making any revenue from it. There were no ads, and then they started slowly introducing ads. And chances are the people who started these online video platforms and so forth knew what their plan was down the road. Let's get everyone hooked. We're going to psyop everyone to use our product and then start introducing this so they can become rich down the road. That is long-term planning when you think about it. That's a psyop. And there's one individual that I've kind of used a few clips that it's kind of funny. Now I'm going to tie this in because it's more political than anything, or it will be. So there's a Chinese guy for an LED sign company in China who does these funny ads, and I have to admit, I think they're hilarious. And it's not so much his ads being hilarious and him promoting the ads, it's what people are saying in the comment section. How this individual should run for president, say they're American, whatever, and how they're bringing back some anti-political correctness stuff, whatever. And it's really interesting how in the same breath people are scared of China. They're saying, oh, China's taking over and buying all our land and everything else, and corporations and everything. But then we have a Chinese guy who, to many more and more, is going to save the world with his type of content, with his ads. Now, I'm not saying anything or implying anything against this person who does these ads in China. They're hilarious. But it's the comment section that I'm focusing on. Companies have been psyoping people for a long time, and Coca-Cola is another good example that comes to mind. How they spent decades psyoping people, and how it was an ingenious plan, long-term plan, how they got people hooked on their product. Putting aside, originally Coca-Cola had cocaine in it, which was addicting, but anyway, and how it started its origins as a medicine and everything else. But giving it away for free, samples, this and that, with the armies and everything else, huge psyop campaign there to promote their product. And as one video on this topic said, you could have their exact ingredients, which is apparently online, create the same product, identical, tastes the same, but because it doesn't say Coca-Cola on your bottle, no one's going to buy it, even if you made the price half of what Coca-Cola is selling for. We see corporations psyoping people all the time. every moment of every day. Whether it be Coca-Cola, whether it be some other product, they're really brainwashing people. And now with this online advertisement and people supporting their content creator, it's amazing to see how people want to be psyoped, to support someone else who they don't know. The other person, the content creator, doesn't know them, and they don't care about who's watching them really as individuals. It's about numbers. But anyway, this corporate psyops, look around you, go online. Within 2 seconds of going online, whether you're doing a search or a video or anything, there's going to be psyops. And that's what commercials and marketing is all about, psyops. And they do employ behavioral studies of human beings to maximize the psyop of marketing. Now, I've always said, for as long as I can remember, if you have to sell your product, then either one, your product's not that good, or two, the person that you're trying to sell to doesn't really need it. But I digress. So corporations psyopting people to make huge profits, and all these CEOs, and it's not just things that you could eat, drink, or wear, or anything else. You also see this, for example, in credit grantors, or with credit grantors, prime, subprime, it doesn't matter, banks, all psyopting people. It's a different strategy. Their targets are different and everything else, and whatever. It's all psyops. The corporations are psyopting people all the time, and these CEOs and everyone else are making a lot of money. And I mentioned in the previous video about inflation, us being in a silent depression right now. Now, where does inflation come from? I've talked about this in another video, or actually mentioned in other videos prior as well. Inflation comes from newly created money getting its value from money that's already in the money stream, that's already in circulation. That's where inflation comes from. Now, the mainstream official narrative would be, oh, there's more people, so there's less money to go around. Let's set aside government spending. I've kind of touched up on that already in another video. But that's the official narrative. That's why there's inflation. That's not true. Because where's all this money really going to? Well, there's two streams of where this money is going to. One, people from other countries, other nations, other lands, whatever, working, say, in your country, let's use Canada as an example, and sending that money that they make out of the country. So that money is not staying within the borders, it's leaving the borders, making another nation rich. That's not the big chunk of it, though. Look at all the trillionaires, billionaires, and let's even include the millionaires. They have all that money, it's their money, so it can't be in circulation. So the more wealth they accumulate, the more inflation there will be. And this is something that mainstream won't even talk about. So when you're talking about the silent depression and not being able to feed your family or clothe yourself because of inflation, being in a silent depression right now, it's because the money that keeps getting added into circulation, decreasing the value of both money, new and old, as a descriptive, is going into the pockets of people who probably couldn't even spend it all if they wanted to. They have so much of it. A lot of it gets wasted. And it's not just in, for example, in the Western countries like Canada and the US, There's countries in the Middle East, for example, where they have trillions of dollars within a family, and they're making ridiculous projects. China, you have all sorts, you have this wealth just being funneled towards a handful of people, and that money's staying within the family. And these families are the ones who people ultimately vote for. And this gets into the topic of plutocracy and oligarchy, the two foundations that run everything, or at least what we can see, because above them there are those who control them. And ultimately, as you go up, as a metaphor, the pyramid, there's very few at the very top that you'll never know about, control everything. And it's not, they don't have that wealth, because now we're talking about things beyond wealth. They just have that control. We'll leave it at that. They don't need wealth. But we have very wealthy families, very wealthy people running everything. Corporations control the people. They have their psyops. These wealthy people lobby, make the laws, make everything else. They're the ones, ultimately, you can say, that allow people to have their privileges, perhaps even take away their privileges. And it all ties in together. And that's been my point for over a decade, how everything ties in together. People are being bombarded with psyops on any topic all the time, 24/7. And if you can't see that, I don't know what to say. But as I've said, even recently, all you have to do is survive whatever is being imposed. You're not stopping it. There are people with generational commitment who are imposing, and they've been successful throughout known history. And they have the monopoly on violence. You're not stopping these agendas. You just survive without compromising yourself. I just want to really give you some things to think about, and hopefully I did. That's my objective here. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
What is the law? Whose law?
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people say, when is it going to get easier? When you die.